Welcome to In the Zone with Chris Zander, where we talk lifestyle, entrepreneurship, self-care, and much more. So go grab a drink or a snack and come on back because it is now time to get in the zone. My guest today is an executive director of Friends of Millridge Park, which is a relatively new park development focused on building community enrichment within the southeastern region of Nashville. Here today to talk about more pertaining to Friends of Millridge Park is Darrell Hawks. How are you, Darrell?
I'm well. Thanks for having me.
So I want to start here. Take us back to North Carolina. That's where you grew up. That's where everything began, doing nonprofit work. Talk about that. What was that like during that time?
Well, since you mentioned North Carolina, I appreciate that. I'll just say that my heart is heavier today given the recent devastation that North Carolina is experiencing as a result of Hurricane Helene. I spent most of my early life in North Carolina. I didn't move to Nashville until 17 years ago.
Yeah.
But I grew up in the foothills of North Carolina and spent most of my days in the outdoors. And in so many ways, it's that early experience that is informing the work that I'm doing here in Nashville all these years later.
Yeah.
My family and many of my friends are still there. And so my partner and I return to North Carolina, particularly the western North Carolina mountains often. And we're always so inspired to be there, not only in the beautiful outdoors, but with the community as well.
Yeah. And when you were living there, you were working in nonprofit work as well, right?
Actually,
Working with, no? Okay.
No. I came to Nashville from North Carolina with more than a decade of work experience in national retail positions.
Okay.
And moved to Nashville as the director of store development for Kirkland's, based here in Nashville.
Gotcha.
And but I will say that my time in North Carolina, although I worked professionally in for-profit and retail work, I found a passion for working in community work, whether it was through neighborhood associations or local nonprofits that I volunteered with and donated my time and talent to.
And you've worked with like some prisons, right? People from prison. Can you talk about that experience as well?
When I was completing my MBA at Belmont, I at that time was doing for-profit work, and I decided that with a decade of experience in business development and for-profit leadership, that I wanted to take that experience and invest it into something more meaningful for me and more meaningful for my community. And so it was actually through a partnership or relationship with Lori LeBlue at Belmont University that I was connected to an opportunity with a Nashville-based nonprofit, Project Return. And they were looking for an individual with a background in business development. Without any formal for-profit experience, I applied for the position of business development specialist. And now I had never been inside a prison at that time and had not worked in a nonprofit formally or professionally. But I interviewed for the job and was hired, to my surprise. And so starting in 2012, I began going into prisons, meeting people who were inside, hopeful about and planning for their return to our community.
Yeah.
And so my charge was to design a program that would connect people returning from prison to immediate employment. And our belief was, and still is, that a connection to a legal economy is really, in so many ways, the only chance for success after returning to the community.
Yeah.
And the only way to avoid returning to prison. And so I had the pleasure of spending nearly 6 years in a full-time professional capacity, designing and launching and then operating three social enterprises, two of which were for employing men and women after prison.
Yeah.
And then the other is for housing people after their return from prison.
I love that. And what is, I guess, from your experience working in that arena, what should people be more aware of regarding this? Because oftentimes there are so many different stereotypes and, people labeling people that have went to prison, different things like that. What have you found to be something that's just not true that you want to clarify for people?
The thing that I found myself saying over and over to people, particularly people who have and had access to opportunities, that folks returning to our community from prison, and some 95% of people who go into prisons do return to our community, they come back with a hope and a unique motivation for succeeding. because let's face it, we can't imagine that anyone who's been in prison would want to go back.
Yeah.
And so it is the responsibility of our society at large and as a whole to ensure that there are opportunities for those people, our people returning, to succeed. And we all benefit if they do. And so blocking people who have a criminal background from access to employment or from access to housing doesn't benefit anyone, and rather further hurts not only that individual, but our community as a whole. And so I think just recognizing that if an individual has come back to our community from having served time, that they have served their time, they have paid their price, regardless of their conviction and their crime. And so really looking at that as an opportunity for us all to care for one another for the betterment of our community at large, I think is what I would offer.
So Friends of Mill Ridge Park is a relatively new park in southeastern region of Nashville. Can you talk about what makes the 622-acre area so unique and such a popular staple here in Nashville?
Well, thank you for knowing the acreage. 622 acres is worth repeating.
Yes.
Because it sits in the middle of southeast Nashville, right in Antioch. And so for many people, it's hard to imagine that there are 622 acres of green space still available to our community, given how much development has happened and is happening throughout really Middle Tennessee. And so the 622 acres were acquired starting back in 2014, thanks to the significant intention and investment by the Joe C. Davis Foundation.
Yeah.
That's a Nashville-based foundation who saw the importance and the priority for creating more green space in Southeast Nashville and Antioch for our community that's growing and diverse and generationally lacking sufficient green space access and outdoor services. And so I oftentimes refer to the parkland as precious. And it's precious not only in what it offers in terms of beautiful nature and historic farmlands and woodlands and streams and ponds and wildlife, all within a few minutes of the residents, students, and employees throughout Southeast Nashville. But it's also precious because there is less and less of it available every day.
Yeah.
And so we're so grateful in Antioch and Southeast Nashville to have Mill Ridge Park as our own space to gather in the outdoors. And we are especially grateful to the Metro Parks Department for stewarding the effort, and the Joe C. Davis Foundation, among a few other investors throughout our community, for making it possible.
The vision at Mill Ridge is to provide sustainable, equitable outdoor experiences for diverse communities. What exactly does this mean when you reference diverse communities?
In Southeast Nashville, we see some 25% of our neighbors who are foreign-born. And beyond that, we are increasingly a minority white community. And so that brings about a lot of richness in terms of cultural influence and contributions. And as we were master planning the park back in 2017, there was a real intentional and might I say even unique and innovative approach to master planning that involved the voices of Southeast Nashville in all our diversity to understand exactly what we all as a community at large, envisioned for the space and expected from the space as our own regional park. And so when we talk about providing an equitable space, we're talking about providing a green space that meets and serves the wishes and the dreams and the needs of our community, not another community. And so Mill Ridge Park looks already different from, I should say, and will look more different from other regional parks, even within Davidson County. And that's by design.
Yeah.
But it also requires a lot more effort and a lot more attention and intention, and that's what we're working on.
You guys focus a lot on cultural enrichment within the southeastern region as well. Why is this a need for the Antioch community?
Well, as I mentioned with our diversity, there's such an opportunity for us to get to know one another, our various backgrounds and cultural experiences and interest. And so we see the outdoors as a neutral place, as a place where we can all come together and express that and share that and bond around our differences. And our world needs that more and more.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And so we see Mill Ridge Park as being a place where that is happening. For example, during 2020, despite the pandemic that began then, we planned for kicking off an annual or semi-annual kite festival.
Yeah.
And so Kite Fest is underway these days again, but ultimately that was one of many planned activities that we now host and facilitate at the park. That's about bringing people together across cultural divides, across race and socioeconomics, across ability and age, to enjoy the outdoors and our space together. But in so doing, getting to know each other in a neutral, comfortable environment. And so we see that beautifully happening on Saturdays during April and October when we invite folks out, and hundreds of folks will show up on a Saturday to fly a kite, have a snack, listen to music, and get to know one another. And in many cases, get to know their neighbors who they would not otherwise connect with because of those divides I mentioned. And so Kite Fest is just one example of how we're doing that, and there are others already happening and more in the planning phase now.
I love that. I want to ask you about the importance of having such a space where all people can come together, because we live in a space to where we're so bombarded with so much every day, and it affects our mental health, right? Whether it's dealing with different people or jobs, just different things, right? Mm-hmm. How have you found that the park has helped aid with mental health from people's personal stories and journeys?
Today's Mental Health Day, and so I'm mindful of how access to space and an opportunity to belong play such a part in how we feel about our lives, and how we feel about our lives affects how we are mentally, and then of course physically as a result of that. So, and that all kind of connects back to, do I have a park nearby where I am welcome, where I'm invited, and where I belong? Among other amenities and spaces within a community. But we are mindful of our opportunity to create a space where folks are invited and welcome and can belong and do belong when they're there. And what we also know is that even for those folks who don't participate in an activity today with us at the park, by receiving the invitation and by seeing their neighbors take part in the activity, we believe that they too are impacted in a positive way. Knowing that you are welcome at a park in your neighborhood, and knowing that you have the opportunity to practice yoga or to join a reading club or to take a hike or to learn birding, has an impact, a positive impact on how you think about your life, the quality of life you live, and your access to a quality life. And so we're every day living that out through the outreach we do, the promotion we do about our activities, the planning that we do, and the way we facilitate those activities. I'm also reminded by your question about an instance where one of our many families, regular families, was at the park on one occasion.
Yeah.
And the mother and her two young children were enjoying the games in the lawn and the refreshments. And while the children were running and laughing and playing, and expending a lot of energy, which was partly her objective, she told me that for them, Mill Ridge Park was their backyard, because what we know is that nearly 2/3 of our community live in rental housing, in which case many times there isn't a sufficient, if any, green space, a front yard, a backyard, a green patch to run and play in safely. And so we also know that at Mill Ridge Park, we are offering and providing a backyard for families, and the little ones are able to grow up and have a connection to nature and the outdoors in the way that I did growing up in North Carolina with a large backyard overlooking the woods and a stream. But also for the parents who can feel better about the life they're giving their children because they have a backyard, so to speak, at Mill Ridge Park. I know that has a real impact on people's emotional well-being, having the access and the proximity to a green space like we offer.
Why is it important to teach and instruct and give youngsters an ability to see what agriculture entails? Why is that so important? Especially when, like you just mentioned, a lot of people are renting, or a lot of people don't have that accessibility to be able to just walk outside and be barefooted in their yard, you know? So why is teaching agriculture and being around it so important for not just young people, but all people, honestly.
We more and more are finding a disconnect between our communities, our little ones especially, and where food comes from.
Yeah.
And agriculture on a small scale and certainly on a large scale. And so that is why the master plan for Mill Ridge Park devoted or dedicated some nearly 20 acres of the green space to community agriculture in the forms of community gardens and programming and spaces such as that. And so when we began operating in 2018, we right away partnered with a few community organizations, including one of my favorite Nashville nonprofits, the Nashville Food Project. And the Nashville Food Project got involved right away and began building and organizing community gardens. And so we have since early 2019 been hosting dozens of community members in the gardens for them to grow and share and enjoy and keep the produce that they grow. And what has beautifully happened is that folks who are coming to the community gardens are growing produce that you or I might not recognize because it's produce from their countries of origin.
Yeah.
And so in so many ways, the community gardens are growing to represent our community at large, and that's just beautiful. And so to your question about why it's important, we first saw it as an opportunity of leveraging the asset of green space in our community for the benefit of our community. And we knew that if we could right away activate it with gardens and growing spaces, that we would, in so doing, engage people and invite people to be on the land and get to know the land and care for the land. And so we knew that beyond the act of growing produce, there was some benefit to just having people begin to associate the land as theirs. And so that was one of our early kind of intentions. The second is the reality that our community lacks sufficient access to fresh, locally grown produce.
Yeah.
I think we're all increasingly aware about that inaccess and food insecurity especially. And so we wanted to create spaces that for folks who had the ability and interest in growing could grow in our community and then use what they grow to nourish our community. And so that's what's happening in the community gardens. Beyond that, we've also created growing spaces that are more as much about the community being together as it is about what we're growing. For instance, we have a community orchard, and in that orchard, we have over the years planted hundreds of fruit trees across a variety of fruits. And we're happy when we can pick pears and enjoy them, or apples, and recently some peaches, and certainly some plums and persimmon. But as important as that, we have seen the value of the community coming together in service, growing together and tending to the trees and planting the trees, sometimes replanting the trees. That is also a real opportunity to nourish our community when we're working together for the greater good of our community. We all benefit, and that's been really beautiful. And then the other example I'll give you about agriculture is we have now in our third year we have planted a pumpkin patch, and the pumpkin patch is just about growing pumpkins in order that we have a space to gather in the fall as a community to experience some of those cultural, seasonal activities and events that some of us grew up with, like painting a pumpkin or carving a pumpkin, building a scarecrow, bobbing for an apple, roasting a s'more. And so we host pumpkin patch parties in the pumpkin patch after weeks of growing and tending to those pumpkins with dozens of community volunteers. And the pumpkin patch has become is just one way of building community, bringing people together, again, across divides, to grow something and share something and enjoy in a tradition together. And that has been incredibly positive. And so much so that last year, while it's a free activity, we call it sold out because we had so many people attend. There was no room for more at the moment. And so we're thinking about all the ways that we can replicate that type of experience from an agricultural standpoint across the hundreds of acres at Mill Ridge Park. And then the last thing I'll say about agriculture is we have been so excited to proceed with our plan to convert a nearly 5,000 square foot barn existing on the parkland since the 1920s.
Oh, wow. That's awesome.
We're excited about having reached a point where we will soon begin to reconstruct that barn into a community space. And the barn, which we're affectionately calling the barn at Mill Ridge Park, will be a community space to provide really three overarching objectives. The first will be for Mill Ridge Park to have an indoor space for year-round indoor programming.
Okay, yeah.
We don't currently have a space other than our headquarters, which is quite small, for gathering dozens or hundreds of folks indoors, particularly when weather requires us to be indoors for park programming. And so we know that this will allow us the opportunity to serve more throughout the year. And then secondly, the barn will offer an opportunity for farmers and gardeners to market their produce.
Yes, yeah.
And we're really excited about having, harvest season farmers and gardeners markets at the barn. And then thirdly, the barn will allow an opportunity for us to host private and public events, and in so doing, generate a little bit of earned revenue to support and sustain the services that we're providing at the park and the care that we're providing for the park.
Yeah.
And so we see the barn as becoming, in Southeast Nashville, really a hub for agricultural programming and learning and sharing for our community.
I love that. And I love the growth that you guys have acquired over the years and still now growing more. That says a lot about just you and the support that you have. What does it feel like to have such support from organizations and companies to give back to you and see your vision?
It really means the world at Mill Ridge Park. If not for foundational and institutional support, corporate support, and even more importantly, individual support. The family who gave $1 last week at Kite Fest, it's that dollar that will go towards us buying another kite for the next family. Right, so it really has meant everything for what we're doing, and what I think is most beautiful about the spirit that's coming to life in support of Mill Ridge Park is that it does involve the local individuals and the neighbors, the students. It involves the corporations that are locally based, but globally operating. It involves the foundations that care about the environment, as well as the foundations that care about student performance, and across the spectrum. And so what we are learning is the broad appeal of the work that we're doing, and we know that's right, and we see the benefit of that, and so we're excited about, to your point, the growth that is to come. We have in so many ways just gotten started. And so I encourage folks to get involved in all the ways that they see right and fit for their organization or for themselves. And there are many ways to be involved in our work. And I said, when we began operating at the park, we knew that Mill Ridge Park would eventually be constructed and it would open to our community. But it would not have been enough and to just build a beautiful park. Right. Our community deserves and our community needs a community-based organization that is representative of our community, that is engaging and involving our community, not only from an advocacy standpoint, but also in a visioning and a design and an operation standpoint of the park. And so we're so excited that there has been that support that has allowed Friends of Mill Ridge Park to get started back in 2018, well before the park was named and built, and has been able to bring about tens of thousands of community members to the park for benefiting from the park, but also for contributing to what the park has become and will become. And we would not be having this conversation, and our community would not have reaped the benefits so far and in the future if it weren't for the people who saw value in what we're doing.
Absolutely.
And invested the dollar or invested the volunteer time to help make it happen.
You have been in leadership roles a lot, which leads to this. You are currently a doctoral candidate at Belmont University, which is how we met.
That's right.
I'm curious to know, what is the correlation between the work you do at Mill Ridge and the work you do as a doctoral student? And how do you use both of those for the benefit of yourself personally and professionally?
Part of why I decided to go back to school is because I found myself, or still find myself, on a very regular basis asking questions I can't find the answers to about our work, the importance of our work, the value of our work, the need for our work at Mill Ridge Park. And so I realized that in some part, it is my responsibility to figure out the answers to these questions in order to advocate for the work that we're doing in the outdoors in Southeast Nashville. And not just for Mill Ridge Park in Southeast Nashville, but for the work across really all communities. And so I figured that one way to figure out those answers would be to learn how to do better research and how to find answers and arrive at answers to questions that are unanswered so far. And so that's part of why I decided to do this doctoral program. And so fortunately, this program, and for me, selected by design in this way, allows for me to take to the classroom the work that I'm doing, regardless of the subject, whether it's quantitative methods we're talking about or it's strategic leadership and strategic planning. I am able to think about the work that I'm doing at Mill Ridge Park and in Antioch and Southeast Nashville through the lens of that subject. And in many cases, I'm able to apply the assignment to the very work that I'm working on at the park. And so I have seen only, in the year plus now that I've been in the program, I have seen some real benefits to the work that I'm doing at Mill Ridge Park from my studies. And I'm excited about that growing as I move through the program.
With leadership as well, what is something that you have learned about yourself that you are very proficient in? And what is something that you're growing to, I guess, become more proficient in, because we all have strengths and weaknesses. And being in leadership, having that role, I think being a PhD student, it kind of allows you to think about that a little bit more and the role you play into that. So I'm curious to know, what is that for you?
I'm more aware of my strength in connecting with people around a task, around the work of an organization, and I'm looking for all the ways that I can do that more effectively for the benefit of the work. So continuing to build relationships, continuing to talk about the work with people who I don't yet know, and networking in order to grow the resources that we have at our disposal and to grow the interest and the support for the work that we're doing. And so that's something I'm more aware of and through this leadership program and looking to leverage more and more. A challenge that I have become more aware of through these semesters is my discomfort with turning down an opportunity to say no. And so I'm learning that a challenge of mine is knowing when to say no. In other words, a challenge of mine is effectively prioritizing, right? I want to pursue all of the opportunities. And so one of the things that we're doing during our weekly game planning sessions at the park is we are identifying the things that we're putting on pause. And it's allowing us a space to say, just because we've been doing this thing and we love it and it's important and people do get a benefit from it, there may be merit to putting a pause on that. It may free us up to focus on something else even greater and more important. It also may rejuvenate our commitment to that thing when we return. And so for me, I'm learning the importance of pausing some things and being okay with a ball dropping and not having to keep all the balls in the air. Right. And the benefit of doing that.
What is the driving force behind what makes your work so personal to you? Because I feel like we all have that, but what is the driving force for you?
Grew up in North Carolina, spent time outdoors, unintentionally. It wasn't planned time outdoors. We just were outdoors. And then I grew into adulthood and spent less time outdoors in my early adulthood. And I think I kind of saw the negative kind of results of that. I missed and craved for more time outdoors. And so as my opportunities allowed for me to be outdoors more, I spent more time on the trails and in the rivers and around the campfires. And ultimately what I realized was that was my way of caring for myself and coping with the stresses of life, the challenges of life, of adulting and life.
Yeah.
And then as I worked with people returning from prison in particular, coming back to the community with such stress and such anxiety, I found myself sometimes unfairly wanting to suggest to them that they just needed to take a hike. And that would, help them cope and help them maybe think about the next step.
Yeah.
But I also, at that same time, recognized that was a suggestion coming from a person of privilege with access who considers myself welcome in the outdoors. And so I had to check myself about it. When I saw an opportunity to work in the community, with the community, to build a space that is for all of us, that is welcoming and designed to serve our needs as expressed by our collective, I jumped at the opportunity. And so what brings me to this work really is my own early day, benefiting from the outdoors and seeing so many people not have the access and the privilege to benefit from the outdoors that I've been fortunate to have.
I want to ask this in conclusion, because time goes by so fast. So how can people get involved? How can people support? And also, what events are happening for the month of November, leading into the next year? What's happening, and how can people get involved?
In November, we will be hosting a variety of weekly activities, and those activities will be an opportunity to serve as a volunteer. Those activities will offer an opportunity to connect with our neighbors in recreational activities. And we'll also have some conservation activities happening. And so regardless of your interest and your ability and your availability, there's something for you at Mill Ridge Park.
Oh, yeah.
Specifically, I get excited about in the late fall, early winter season when we host what we call fireside stories. And that's an opportunity for folks to come together in the cool and cold outdoors around a fire and to share stories. And oftentimes the storytelling begins with a storybook that we provide to the families who come that is based on nature and community. And then oftentimes the storytelling kind of evolves into stories being shared between neighbors and across the campfire. Fireside stories is one of the things I look forward to. Also, during late November and into December and January, we'll be hosting regular guided hikes and birding outings and sky watch parties. And those will be opportunities to bundle up and be together in the outdoors and being inspired by and fascinated with nature. Those are guided and led and oftentimes are educational. And not only are we creating the space and the guidance for those outings, we also are providing the refreshments, hot chocolate or ginger snaps, for instance, for the outing. We also are providing the information and the materials as well, whether that's the binoculars that you might need for birding or it's the birding guide that we'll take along the way.
I love that. So how can people support, show up? Where can they follow Friends of Mill Ridge Park? All of that.
We are online and on social media as Friends of Mill Ridge Park. And so folks can go to our website. They can sign up for our emails that come out on a regular basis, and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. And then on our website are our contact email address and phone number. And so myself and my coworkers are available and ready to hear ideas about how we care for the parkland and how we activate the parkland and how we serve the community. And we are available to take requests and questions about accommodating people's needs at the park if they have special needs. And so we show up every day in the spirit of making Mill Ridge Park a place where everyone is welcome and belongs. And we do that through a whole host of activities. And so we look forward to seeing you there and the community.
Well, Darrell, thank you so much for your time today. I certainly appreciate it. And I hope those of you who are watching today are able to feel inspired to get outside, get outdoors, and more than anything, go and check out the website and go pay a visit to Friends of Mill Ridge Park. Guys, thank you for tuning in today. And until next time.